Okay. Well, my name's Larry Seaquist. I've represented the district for the last 4 years, 4 sessions. My wife Carla and I live down in Gig Harbor. As you may know, I'm a retired naval officer. I particularly appreciate this opportunity to meet with you and the editorial board because the Kitsap Sun does a good job of political reporting. And we're at a time right now in the newspapers around the state where there are very little political reporting. And I really appreciate the fact that you guys put this much time into it. I really enjoy these campaign seasons because they're an opportunity to do a lot more than political marketing or just ask voters for their votes. In my view, what's going on in these election campaigns is a protracted discussion inside these communities about what the issues are. And there probably has not been an election year where there were bigger issues or more important choices than this year. So I've been looking forward to this discussion with you and to the other public fora that Doug and I participate in. There are 2 things on my mind. One is that we're in the wrong place at the wrong time in history, headed the wrong direction with some very bad politics. Let me give you an example. Just a couple of days ago, Saturday in fact, I was out in Navy Yard City going door to door, talked to a young woman, single mom, who said to me something that is almost exactly word for word that I've heard from men, women, Republican, Democrats, and everybody in between. She says, "It's not fair. I'm stuck. You play by the rules, you work hard, and you can't get any place." In her particular case, she had, after a tough start in life, she was a single mom with 2 young kids, she had managed to get her way through college thanks to student loans, got an MBA, got a good job, but was worried every week that she might not have that job. She was trying to pay off her student loans and not sure she was going to be able to keep enough money together to get her kids through college. So she felt like everything she'd done was the right thing, but she wasn't going anyplace. That resonates with me because I started life in a very poor farm family where we were renters. We didn't have 2 nickels. In fact, we farmed with horses. We couldn't afford tractors. But we saved our money, and I remember as a 7th grader that I put my $232 in my bank account into the family pot, and we put a down payment on a farm. Then I worked my way through college. Then I got enlisted in the Navy, worked my way to a commission, worked my way to command of a ship, and in the Pentagon worked my way to being a fairly senior defense official. People can't do that anymore. Just in my lifetime, we've seen our society turn around so that this young woman, if you're born poor today, you're going to stay poor. If you're born in a family without college graduates as parents, you're probably not going to get a college degree. And if you have parents that fall out of work for more than 6 months, they will probably never recover their income, and their kids will probably never get anything like that. So we need to turn that around. The problem that really bothers me is it's easy to say that and recognize it. The question is, what do you do about it? And our politics here in the state and certainly nationally are broken. We do not have the healthy kind of cooperative, collaborative, bipartisan politics. It's good to have 2 sides to every issue. But in many cases now, we simply got 2 hostilities firing howitzer shells at each other, pouring acid on the political process. So what I'm committed to is to try to talk to you today and to the voters during this campaign about what practical steps can I take as one legislator from one district that would actually make a difference about where we're going and particularly about the politics.
Thanks, Larry.
Well, hi, I appreciate you all here today, taking time out of your personal lives to come and listen to a couple potential politicians talk, where I'm glad to be here because I get an opportunity to express my ideas of how we can get out of the current situation we are as a state. Tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in the Port Orchard area. I was one of those recession kids of the 1970s and 80s, and my dad worked job to job, and it was hard to stay in any one community, but he worked hard and actually traveled quite a bit in the state of Washington, everywhere from Mount Vernon to Tacoma to Olympia, just to put food on the table while we grew up in Port Orchard. I'm proud to say that I graduated South Kitsap High School. I'm proud of that because I'm I'm a wolf and I like the wolves. And I met my high school sweetheart in high school, and we got married, and we're currently living out in Owala, if any are familiar with that. It took me about a year to learn how to spell that, but we currently live out there raising our 4 children. My 19-year-old daughter Mackenzie, I have a 16-year-old daughter Delaney, 12-year-old daughter Rebecca, and a 9-year-old son Sam. I got out of the high school and I decided I was going to join the United States Navy. I had a desire. I was one of those Top Gun kids. I thought I was going to fly Navy jets. And, unbeknownst to me, you can't fly Navy jets when you're working on a flight deck. They don't allow you to get into their jets. So I worked on the flight deck of the USS Carl Vinson, probably served my country in the Persian Gulf during a little known conflict called Operation Ernest Will, where I earned my Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, and then I left the Navy, got out of the Navy, and I joined the fire service. I enjoyed serving my country, and I figured, well, I can continue that service with my community. Spent the last 20 years serving my community in the fire service, and currently serve as a battalion chief with South Kitsap Fire Rescue. I've been doing that. During that time period, I also was a small home builder. Built about nearly 30 homes over the last 12 years on the Kitsap Peninsula, so I had some small business experience. I too, being growing up in a poor family, my dad raised 5 kids, did not have the opportunity to send us to college. So I took the money that I earned during the Navy Sea College program, put myself through community college while I was working as a firefighter, and then just most recently in 2009 achieved my bachelor's degree in management from the University of Eastern Oregon, and was able to do that. So I have achieved the American dream. I feel like that I have an opportunity. I had the opportunity to work my way up and be able to achieve something for myself and my family. I am the first to achieve higher education on both sides of my family, so I'm proud of that, and I'm going to pass that on to my children. During that time, though, I've recognized that being in the community, being in people's homes and lives in their time of need, through either fire or emergency medical services or just plain flooding to their homes or whatever it may be, I become attached to the community and recognize the needs that they have. And then you couple on that the economic crisis that we've had over the last few years. I've seen the hurt and pain and the suffering. When you read news stories like 1 in 10 houses are in foreclosure, and you knock on doors, and we've touched about 8,800 doors already in the South Kitsap and Gig Harbor communities, and you hear constantly people talking about whether they're going to be able to meet their mortgage payment this month, whether they're going to be able to even afford the basic necessities. As I knock on doors and people don't answer, you see the stickers on there from Cascade Natural Gas and PSE that say, if you do not pay, we'll shut off by a certain time. So that shows me that our community is in need, and after serving my community as a firefighter, I have an innate desire to go down and solve some of those issues. I think we can solve those issues by looking at what the core functions of government are. You know, people have come to expect a lot from their government, and I think we've come to expect too much. We need to focus back into the core essentials, which are education, public safety, transportation, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's really where I want to focus. I want to bring an efficiency to government. We do it in our current organization that I serve in the fire department. We run a $14 million budget, and during that time, or excuse me, with that budget, we have created an efficiency that allows us to be one of the most service given to the community for the least amount of tax dollar. So that's what I'd like to take down to Olympia, is some of that hyper efficiency that we use in the fire service. And I know I run out of time, so I'll leave it there.
Well, we will get to those things. We'll go right to them. Actually, the first question I wanted to ask, Larry kind of touched on it, but Doug, I'll let you start with this one. I don't think there's probably not a lot of disagreement. If the incumbent says things are broken, that means we can admit it. But what you were starting to get at was how you start to cooperate or collaborate more. And I know you're a group in the Democratic caucus who's kind of trying to do that, is trying to be a little more moderate. But I want to hear Doug's opinion on what is it in either your background or your personality that makes you a person who can, who would go to Olympia and be able to work across the aisle and kind of solve some of those problems that you say are fundamental. And we'll have a similar question to address from your perspective.
Great question, because really that's what it's going to take to solve the problems in Olympia is cooperation. And I have the experience through the years, 20 years in the fire service. I served as the union president for the fire service, and we negotiated the contracts for several years. During that time frame, I learned what interest-based negotiating is. And really, that's sitting down at the table with people across the aisle. In this case, it was management, and looking at the budget, looking at what the priorities were, look at what was needed to get accomplished, what was the needs of the community were, and creating a sustainable budget that included the needs of the employee and the wages of the employee. And then fast forward 20 years later, I currently serve as the president of the Battalion Chiefs Local, which is on the administration side of things. So I get to sit in at times with the negotiations or labor management from labor's perspective, from management's perspective. And so that has given me the ability to learn how to work across the ideas and issues and see both sides of the coin, because truly there is two sides to every issue. We need to recognize that no matter whether it's education, public safety, transportation, health services, there's always two sides of the coin. It's, can we sit down and dialogue together? Can we come to a conclusion that's good for the people? And can we create a system that is sustainable?
Let me, first about why this is so important, why nonpartisanship or bipartisanship, those capabilities are so important. We're at a time with some especially difficult problems to solve. Trying to dig our way out of this recession. We're trying to make some fundamental changes in our school system. We've got to do some radical shifts in the nature of the budgeting and policies that we do to run our government. We've got some environmental issues to struggle with. And every single one of those are things that are too big for one party, including my own party, in the legislature to solve by itself. If we don't do those on a fundamentally bipartisan basis, we won't have solutions that last. Now, my particular skills in that, to go to your direct question, I've got a lot of years in command, and what I learned about myself and my track record as I command one ship after another is that I'm a team builder. That really good leaders are actually team builders. And after I finished my Navy career, I spent about 15 years traveling around the world and in American communities, helping local communities build their own teams. So my particular skill set, if I'd say to that, is an ability, a natural ability, an interest in working across the aisle and in getting our local citizens involved. Examples of that are the Plan C group that we formed 2 years ago to get the community involved in the ferries. Last year I did a vitamin E group with a lot of citizens involved in education reform. And this is in the legislature. This got to the point where a reporter, and one of our political reporters, asked me one day, says, "Larry, are you sure you're not a Republican?" I said, "No, I'm a Democrat. Why do you ask?" He says, "Because the number 2 on all of your bills is a Republican." And I do that deliberately, so that anything that I'm pushing through the legislature, if at all possible, I've got some bills which didn't end up with Republican number 2s, as the lead partner with you. But I have tried to do that over and over, is to put together a community which can work together to solve those problems.
Let me just follow up on that, and we'll give, I think we can phrase this in a way that it applies to your kind as well. We covered it, we were actually involved in some of that Plan C and some of those things that you've done when you've reached out to the communities. How do you, and I think I agree that that's really important, that people want to be involved and they see the need for change and voters want to be kind of engaged in that. But there's some frustration at it only gets so far, and what does it actually look like when it gets down there? They maybe hand you a plan and you don't get anywhere, or that voice stops at a certain level. So how are you going to either doing those similar programs in the future, but then you pushed on to actually get some tangible results? And then if you were in the seat, how willing are you to do that stuff? What do you, would you do it differently? What would you do to move that along and get that for people?
And this voter anger that we're all talking about, Democrat, center, right, Republican voter anger, which is very real, is in my view largely coming because these voters feel like they aren't connected. They aren't being listened to. They're being marketed to, given empty slogans. So I've been looking at a couple of things, David, including this morning on the phone. I keep looking for new ways that we can connect citizens together to the issues. One of the things I did about 3 weeks ago in Gig Harbor with Republicans, including one of Doug's supporters in his campaign there, is run a Saturday morning seminar workshop with Republicans and Democrats, more than 40 of them, to make their own budgets. And we had in several of the tables, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, hardliners, sitting down together talking about budgets. You would have thought there would have been an explosion. But at the end of an hour and a half, every one of those tables said, I had no idea that we agreed on so much, and I like talking to this person. So I've been trying to do that in the community of actually testing these new ways of getting the community involved in our discussions. You would think with Facebook and the internet, we ought to be able to multiply that. I did a thing with the League of Women Voters that we're going to put up on television. I've had TVW to look at it to see if we could actually do these online so citizens could actually participate in the simulations. Now in Olympia, there's a separate problem, and that's to force my caucus, which has had a large majority and has basically counted its votes. You need 50 votes in the House, 98 members, is largely counted its 50 votes or its 52 votes inside its own caucus. I have been interested in counting those votes across the aisle. And so even this campaign season, I continue to talk to Republicans about issues in healthcare, particularly, that we need to cooperate on.
How do you take the things from those community groups, though, and apply them? How do you convince another legislator, that we need to listen to these folks and just take their ideas?
A couple of ways, like the Plan C group at the ferries, we simply brought them down to testify. If you bring a group of citizens in and they say, we've thought about this, those citizens include the mayor, the county commissioner, the Chamber of Commerce, writers who are really serious, they've got a good briefing, they know what they're doing, then like any citizen who makes a good appearance, they can have an impact.
I think the component that's missing is execution. You know, we've missed the boat on performance-based budgeting and programs where we actually look at how do we execute the ideas that the public or other legislators bring forward. I'm not so foolish to recognize that I am not going to have all the ideas down there. There's going to be a lot of good legislators down there. And the goal is to gather these ideas together instead of sitting around and talk about it and have more committees and more ideas and talking about who supports it and who doesn't support it. It's creating defined goals and objectives that can be implemented so that we can take these ideas and execute them. Any plan is great, as a good friend of mine says all the time. You know, an idea's in your head, but a plan's on paper, and you need to execute that plan. I think there's many areas within our budget system, within our education system, within the Washington State Ferry system, that there's a lot of great ideas. They've been talked about in a lot of committees, but they've failed to execute the plan. I take command leadership down there. We don't have an option to not execute our plan when we arrive on a scene of a 3-story house on fire. We have a very short amount of time to distinctly look at what the problems are, create a defined set of goals and objectives, and then execute the plan. And then build a team, get a coalition, and move it forward. And you can't be so stuck to believe that you got to get every single part of your idea forward. It's taking the good parts of everyone's ideas, building that coalition, moving it across the aisle, and getting it accomplished. We're there for the will of the people. You know, as Ronald Reagan said, it's amazing how much can get done if you're not worried about who gets the credit.
Let me push that ahead just a second. One question that we usually ask in these meetings is we say, what are your 3 priorities? And,
Sure.
and to tell you the truth, they come across very similar, kind of what you said before. Everyone says education. Well, the state is supposed to do that anyway. And public safety, things like that. And we know that's what voters want to hear. Now,
I'm going to give you a slightly different.
okay, we'll let you say it in a few minutes. You're both talking about getting people involved in that process and moving it ahead and how you execute it down there. And the government, or the governor, Governor Gregoire, started talking about this priority-based budgeting, how that the system will be built on that. What's your strategy for getting the people's voice into those priorities? How do you take that How do you listen? How do you get a true feeling of what people's priorities are out there? More so than just, well, education's a priority. But how are you going to get into those heads and then use that to build the budget on? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's one thing to go out there and figure out that the priority is education, let's take for example, and that's a generic term. You need to get out in the community. I think that's how you do it. You get into the community groups, like the chambers, the Rotaries, the little Republican groups and Democratic groups, and go across that and reach across and get those ideas, having the community civic groups get together and give you those ideas. Then what you do is you take those ideas down, in this case it'd be the House side, and when we get that budget from the governor, we get an opportunity to produce the House budget, and we implement those priorities into the House budget, and we push that across the aisle. We use our coalition team to push that. It takes hard work, it takes leadership. This is not easy. These are challenges. If it was easy, everybody would run, right, Larry? It's not one of those things that we look forward to, and especially in this economic time. People are looking for jobs, and they're looking at this recession. They want change, and it's going to be tough facing a $3 billion deficit in this upcoming session. But this is where it's a must to have strong leadership. It's a must to take distinct goals and objectives, stick to the plan, execute the plan, take the will of the people, which in my view I've been listening to on the 8,800 doorsteps I've hit, and I'm planning on hitting another 10,000. And when I hear those needs, what I'm hearing is jobs, and they want to they can't afford to pay any more taxes. That's what I'm hearing. They're telling me, Doug, I want a job. I want to go to work, and I can't afford to give the state any more money. And so those are the priorities. That's what I see as the priorities, and we can do that. I know we can do that. We've done it in our own organization. This is in a micro version. We can do it on a macro version too.
Your priorities, and also, like Doug just shared, the priorities that you have heard from.
Can I go back to your question about how you get things done right now,
Sure.
just for a second?
Sure.
Do the priorities. This is a conversation that I've had. I was in Olympia yesterday afternoon talking with Brian Sontag's folks. Brian Sontag has endorsed me, by the way, I'm pleased to say. To be quite blunt, our House Democratic budget process, as I've told my House Democratic leaders, is not working right. The last couple of years, facing very severe problems, budget balancing problems, we've ended up with everybody at each other's throats. This fight about taxes, which I was voting against. So I have been pushing my leadership to overhaul the way we go about doing our budgets. And it's not a matter just of having a plan. It's how that process inside that government actually puts together budgets. I'm actually not expecting a lot from the governor out of her budget process. I'm quite concerned that we're going to end up with something that fundamentally the House Democrats will have to rebuild that budget in close consultation with some Republicans. Now, and what I'm trying to do, by the way, is make sure that I've got a voice in that. I'm not running just because I want to sit in the back of the hall and vote once in a while. I want to have a voice in how that budget is put together, particularly how that budget process works. I've got a lot of experience in doing budgets, and that's what I'm trying to bring to this. My priorities, if you look at where we are in this economy and what these issues are, talk to the voters every day to get a sense of where they are. My priority number one is to downsize the state government. We're at a point where, with a very fragile recovery, a recovery of only 1 or 1.5%, 2%, if we're lucky, over the next 8 or 10 years, the state government has a structural deficit. We simply have, according to the current plans, more requirements than we have probable revenue. So we have to reset state government down. I've got a set of things to downsize executives and things like that. But you're not going to get it just by shrinkage. You've got to restructure, priority number two, you've got to restructure the way we actually deliver social programs. We're going to have to downsize and overhaul the way those programs, are delivered. And number three, as we do that, I think we've got to make sure that we start education on an upward path. Be glad to talk to you about that more, because I think that's the real secret of how we're going to dig our way out of this economy.
Explain
Sure
what
you're
you
not
mean.
Republican?
I am. No, I'm actually a very mainstream Democrat. I'm telling my Democrats, this is where the center of the party is.
Explain what you mean when you say restructure how social programs are delivered, but you're not saying cut away.
Oh, no, we are going to have to.
What does that mean? What does
Yeah,
it mean?
I'm Vice Chair of Healthcare and Human Services Appropriations. We've got the largest single pot of money in Olympia, and we're going to have to take that down by a couple $2 billion. So let me give you one example right here in Kitsap. Kitsap Mental Health Services, which is a very good mental health nonprofit corporation, gets 6 separate audits from the state every year after they buy their national federal audit. So I've talked with Joe Rozak, and I've taken him down to see Susan Dreyfus, the head of DSHS, about completely restructuring the way mental health services are delivered so that Joe Rozak at Kitsap Mental Health, the developmentally disabled folks and the substance abuse people would gather together, design the way they would deliver those services here in the Kitsap community, and get the state out of the business of all of these auditors and staff people so that the state's role at a much lower cost would be to provide the money and the basic framework. So that's one of the things we're doing right now. And I think the secret of HEAD is going to do the next wave of welfare reform so that instead of large federal and state bureaucracies doing things for folks in need, we're going to have the local community designing and running those programs with much less volume of staff level at that higher level. That's where I think we need to go.
And you also said that you think you need to be rebuilding back into education. Where does the money come to do something like that?
If we can make sure that increased money is going to result in higher productivity, what I would do, David, is close down tax exemptions the same way we close military bases, with a nonpartisan, independent BRAC commission. We have, depending on who does the counting, League of Women Voters says about $65 billion. Others say maybe about $95 billion of tax exemptions on the books. If we took 2 or 3% of those every 2 years in our biennial cycle, we could say that exemption, however useful it was, needs to be traded into additional funding that would go to the schools. I would have this nonpartisan independent panel make those choices with public hearings in the legislature. Here's $1 billion or $1.5 billion for schools. This biennium, you either take it or leave it. We put that together. So there was some practical way. That's why the BRAC Commission works well when we do military base closing. So that's my idea about downsize government, restructure the fundamental social services, and then start that education rebuild.
Doug, what's your kind of take on the shrinking government versus restructuring government and some ideas? Is there more to cut to fill that gap that's coming up?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we talk about downsizing, resizing, shrinking, and doing all that. And the bottom line is that we don't have enough funds. I mean, we are revenue deficient. And so we have just very few options. We can either borrow more money. Well, we're at our borrowing cap. We can either borrow more money from the feds. The feds aren't going to give us any more money. And even if they do, it's a one-time shot in the arm. We can raise taxes, which is not going to help the economy. It's going to just push us farther into the recession. Or we can cut spending. And these are the tough choices that we need to do. We're going to have to cut spending. We've been talking for too long about restructuring. It's time to take action. While I hear about these restructuring issues, for the last 4 years we've increased government by over 30%. What kind of restructuring is that? I think, Larry, you said we're going to put Washington on a slim fast diet. And obviously they've been sneaking to the fridge in the middle of the night. We have to do something about the continued increasing size wages in government, of employment in government, of programs in government. It seems like every year we go to the budget table. We want to bring our pet project to the table and see what we can get through. And when I say we, both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike, they want to bring their idea to the table and talk more about building new programs than we do about talking about taking care of the ones we already have. We need to look at what's efficient. Which programs are actually providing the service that they claim to provide in communities? And if they're not providing that service, they need to be cut or reduced.
Where do you see the target for that? Because the last 3 sessions at Olympia, it has been cut away at the budget. You say there's still that are growing and still things that are...
Absolutely. We say we cut the budget, but really spending's increased. $1.8 billion last year in the budget biennium. If we look at the idea that Brian Sontag has brought forward, right there is over $3 billion worth of savings alone. I think what we do to increase the revenue base to help pay for some of these programs to get us back on stable footing is we turn and look at what the jobs issue is. We are a sales tax state. That's the reality of it. If you broaden your tax base by getting people back to work, there's more revenues coming in. If there's revenues coming in, we can get into a stable funding situation. How do we get people back to work? I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves. How do we get people back to work? Well, we help small business get people back to work. 2/3 of every job in the state of Washington created is small business. If we can get small business back on their feet, we can get back to work, we can broaden the tax base, we can solve some of our revenue issues, and then during that time, we can look at changing the structure of government, realigning government, but the immediate need, it's no different than when I arrive on the scene of an injured person at a car wreck. If I work on the broken leg and they're bleeding, it does no good. We got to stop the bleeding. How do we stop the bleeding? We get people back to work. They'll produce the income needed by the state. We can look at restructuring. We can do that. We can do things to help small business, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a lot of the initiatives, but little things like workers' comp reform. We can get E&O tax reform. We can do L&I reform, unemployment insurance reform. A lot of things to help small business create jobs necessary. Instead of leaving the state, we should be encouraging jobs to come to the state.
Yeah, B&O tax, almost everyone we've had in here has agreed that that's
right.
Naturally to go after. Almost every candidate we've had come through. I had a poll the other day, King 5, did you see this? That says, and I forget, I don't have the numbers exactly, but the voters are more, it looks like the income tax initiative, people are in favor of implementing that, and at the same time, taking away the bottled water, candy, those taxes that were instituted last time. That tells me that maybe there's a feeling out there that maybe we shouldn't be a sales tax state anymore, is that there should be a number of tax revenues. Do you agree? Do you agree with that, or is that not a way to go? Is being so focused on the sales tax, is that wise for our structure, or is that something that needs to be looked at too? I'll let you begin.
Okay. I do oppose income tax. I don't think that is wise this time. If things were chugging along and the economy is running well, I think the transition could probably be argued and debated at the table, and we could come to a good dialogue and conclusion on what we need to do. We're still don't even know if we're at the bottom of this recession. I know that the national media tells you, oh, we're turning the corner, but yet revenue has been re-projected over and over and over and over, and they're saying, well, maybe now 2014. The bottom of a recession is not the time to be changing your tax structure. That will only cause a further deepening of the recession. We need to help people now with the current systems we got in place. I liken that to being on the fire scene. We don't unplug the fire hydrant that we currently are connected to put the fire out. We can do that at a different time. But as long as it's producing water, and then we can connect to another one, we'll get additional water. It's not working right now. It's not the time to do that. So I'm opposed to moving to it. A prime example is just look south of the border. Look at Oregon. They raised the state income tax. They projected billions of dollars of revenue, 1.96 billion, I think, and as of August, they're going to be $557 million short, and they'd already spent that money. So there is misnomers out there on just saying, well, this is going to solve our problems. It's more complicated than that. There's a lot of moving pieces when you switch from one tax system to another, and this is the time to do it.
I've got a different take on it. Obviously, we have got, as it sounds like your other interlocutors have said, we've got to overhaul our tax system. Just adding, I will vote against, I'm campaigning against this measure to add the high income tax. It has some piece in there that makes sense, because we do, as you suggested, we do have to broaden our tax base to get beyond our very high reliance on sales tax and this also regressive B&O tax created back at the bottom of the Depression as a desperate measure to try to fund Washington state budget. And here it is, still here, next century. But I'm encouraged by this poll that says people are actually interested in the broader tax base. This is not going to happen until the citizens of this state, the business people of this state, agree that we need to reset the way we do taxes. We had, according to a study from the Rockefeller Institute in New York that studies state budgets and state economies, we could actually lower tax income if we had a stable tax base. So we do shift. I am at this point opposed to making that transition because A, we don't know what that new structurally sound lower state government level is. We've got to come to an agreement about exactly what it is we do want the state to fund so we know what size that tax base should be. We don't know the answer to that question yet. That's why I was voting against taxes last year, and while I'll continue because we haven't answered the opening question in the discussion. Then we can say what kind of revised tax structure would give us a stable long-term source. That's the real conversation. Maybe this year we're getting a little closer, but my reading of our voters is that they're so scared about their own situation right now, they're not quite ready to have that conversation.
And just to be clear, the poll did not say that those
Right.
things. I was looking at,
Right.
it asked on each initiative, and I was seeing these two of those
Right.
and how they go.
But I agree with
was
you.
wondering if that was.
Yeah, I read it the same way.
That's all that.
When you
didn't
talk to
ask that.
people at the doors, there is a recognition, that we do have to pay taxes. That we're looking for some kind of practical way. So just over the last few years, I have a sense that we're getting closer to being able to launch that conversation. But it really is a statewide discussion that we've got to have in the form of an initiative or a referendum somehow to take that step, and we're not quite there yet.
Does anyone else want to ask a question? I've asked everybody. Go ahead.
One. You were both talking about how you listen to the voters, and in my opinion, it sounds like you are listening to them. What do you think is the anger behind the voters toward Olympia in general? And as a representative, what would you do to help?
Mm-hmm. It's an important question, and it's something that we talk about in the campaign almost every day. I think the sources of that, first of all, we're at the bottom of a severe recession. People, when people are really hurting, the amount of unemployment, homelessness, the poverty, the lack of health care, there is a huge amount of pain in our community that I'm not sure that everybody really appreciates. It is being accentuated, unfortunately, and speaking on a partisan basis right now, the Democrats do their share of this, but the National Republican Party is pouring Karl Rove quality acid on this. They're deliberately inflaming and inciting the Republic to this, which I find very unhelpful. I'm really alarmed by this nasty, divisive politics. So for those of us here in the district, we've got to try to connect to Democrats who are disappointed that Obama didn't do enough, swing voters who said, this is a swing district. We're almost evenly balanced, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, and everybody in this district, except a couple of people, are really independent. Almost no one says, I'm just a party person. So the combination of that pain, this national media bath, acid bath that they're in, apprehensiveness, means that I think we need to offer them, as I said earlier, a feeling like they're actually being listened, not just listened to, but they're able to participate. That's what I keep hunting for, is whether it's internet things, We've got to do more than just go to door. We've somehow got to be able to create this sense of we're back in control of our lives.
But beyond what you're saying on a national level, and maybe I wasn't particularly clear, why do you think local voters are angry at the government in Olympia?
Because they've nationalized it. It's very clear this year that the local voters' emotional politics have been strongly influenced by the national issues. Immigration, the economy, are the bankers under control, healthcare, those kind of national issues are infused. When you just ask a voter, what's on your mind? They will start telling me at the state level about national issues. So it really is that this election at the local level is very nationalized. And we have to work to pull them back to say, now in Olympia, this is where our issues are.
I would disagree. I would say that when I'm on the doorstep and I hear where their anger comes from, it's no different than running a home budget. They say, why are we spending more than we make? It makes no sense to me. You know, we had people who are way smarter than me, economists, in 2008 say this is going to be a protracted recession. They said that we may be out of it in 2010, 2011. We've already seen that that's wrong. But even during that time frame, the state government has increased the size of government, like I said, by over 30%. They've continued to ask for more money, more programs, while people in the community have seen their jobs being shrunk in size, days being furloughed. They felt the effects of the recession, while Olympia has been supposedly immune to it. And I think part of that is lack of the representation communicating with the local community. You know, it's one thing to put out a flyer, it's one thing to put a nice little TV ad together, but it's another thing to get into the community, get into the groups, get into the people, and find out where they're hurting. They are losing their jobs. They are being foreclosed on. They are struggling to make ends meet. And the anger comes because they feel like government feels that it has a right to ask for more money even though they have no more money to give. And when I'm at the doorstep, they're not talking about immigration. They're not talking about what President Obama's doing. They're asking why is the Washington State ferry system wasting $5 million? Why is the Dally Valley interchange, why did we waste $800 or $900 million on that? Where's the responsibility? Where's the accountability? They want a more accountable government. What the legislators have forgotten is that it's our tax dollars. It's the people of the community's tax dollars, and when they give it to the government, they expect a hyper efficiency. They really do. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm one of those angry voters. I mean, I enjoy being a battalion chief. I got 4 kids that I go play baseball with and bike ride with and do things like that. I like being a dad. But I was so frustrated watching the legislature continue to produce budgets that were overspending the money they were bringing in that I got involved. And I think that resonates in the community. I think the community wants strong leadership that says enough is enough and it's time to do better. And I think that's what you hear at the doorsteps. I think that's why there's anger.
Can you clarify the government growth of 30%? What do you mean specifically?
Spending. Spending. Sorry.
Over what time frame?
Last 4 years.
You know, may I respond just briefly, because it's simply, it's flatly not accurate. I would like to, and I kept voting for those numbers to be even smaller, but the fact is that the state operating budget, which I sit on the Ways and Means Committee and help shape, is smaller. I wanted it even smaller, and it is going to get more small coming up pretty soon. But this, you know, it is coming down. The question is, we've got to go further, and you've got to do that in a way that actually restructured these programs. Let me give you one example of something I've been working on. Right now, we have about 6,000 executives in the state government. The governor appoints about 1,200 people. There are about 4,700 and some in a thing called the Washington Management Service. They're like the federal super grades. They're an extra, originally there were only 400 of these dudes. We've now got more than well over 4,700 of them. I've been after them to see if we can actually get rid of that entire cast of so-called leaders. You talk to our local state employees and they will tell you, I got too many bosses. So that's the kind of practical, one budget item at a time things that I've been working on to make those cuts.
If I could also respond, I hate to cloud the issue with facts, but the Office of Financial Management from our own state says that our budget has increased 30% since 2007. It went from $57.63 billion to $74.8 billion. The facts don't lie. My opponent voted for both those biennium budgets. He voted for those increases. And that's why when a firefighter from South Kitsap running against an incumbent does so well in the primaries, because they recognize the voting record. They recognize that the facts are the facts. The Office of Financial Management is not going to lie to the public. And so that's where we're at. That's where that voter anger comes from. It comes from distorting facts and telling us that you're cutting budgets when actually you're only cutting from the proposed increases. We still raised spending last year, even though everyone thinks we cut $2.8 billion. It's just...
Yeah, absolutely. The operating budget. If you take all the federal money and you take the stimulus money and you take all the transportation money, I don't know what that total, where that particular sheet of paper, I haven't glad to look at it, but I can tell you the operating budget that was running $30 to $31 billion is now down at 29 and headed south. It needs to go down further. I'm very well known. It's simply wrong to say that I'm down there voting for. I'll tell you what taxes I did vote for. I voted for nicotine taxes. I did cheerfully increase that because we're going to be able to lower our overall health care costs because people stop smoking, particularly the Medicaid people, and we end up not only getting a small amount of revenue, which we use for smoking cessation campaigns, but we end up with healthier people who don't cost as much in Medicaid.
I think that's one that we will investigate ourselves, and I encourage any voter to do so too. We're getting close, but there was one question I wanted to ask. This is one, Larry, you've been real active in ferry issues with the Plan C, and then most recently that letter that sent to the governor. I was curious on, I wanted to hear just an update from you on where that was going. And the reason I wanted Doug to respond to that too is because this seat has played a role in ferries, and so I wanted your opinion on what you look at as the priorities when you go talk about that. So I think it's most appropriate to give an update on what you know on that letter first, and then what's the next step for you.
Just to recap, I sent a letter to the governor when they started the process of sea trials for the new small ferry, Chetzemoka. From their own information, including information that David Mosley, the head of the ferry system, told me personally, it looked like they were getting into trouble on some design errors. So I sent a letter to the governor and got wonderful editorial support from the Sun, thank you very much, saying we needed to get somebody technically competent in there to help make decisions. We needed an accountability audit, and we needed to get the ferry system out of the business of even designing these things in the first place. Last Thursday afternoon, Paula Hammond signed out a letter back to me, which I got by email Friday morning, basically saying, thank you very much for your interest in the ferry system. We're doing just fine, thank you. And I went down yesterday and met with Brian Sontag's folks that I'd kept involved in this on how we can do actually an executive accountability audit, a forensic audit. And out of that discussion yesterday, in fact this is, I guess, breaking news or whatever, because this was just yesterday afternoon, what I'm going to do is ask Mayor Lent, Commissioner Charlotte Garrido, they're going to hear it here first, is to join me in writing a letter to the Transportation Commission to ask them to go do that follow-up audit. What's happening right now is that the ferry is being sea trialed. They have not yet announced whether or not they've put our own crews on it and when they're going to start crew training towards putting the thing into service. I thought I would wait till Friday before I asked David Mosley where he is on the next step. The other thing that I have frankly, again, been consulting with our staff attorneys about is the legality of the ferry system not being fully revealing in what's happening. They've dropped a cone of silence over what's happening with the Chetzemoka, and I think it's inappropriate. The question is, what's the statutory requirement for an agency to be completely forthcoming about what they're doing? And so I don't know where that's going to go, but that's another line of inquiry I've got right now. So my plan is to keep the pressure on. Next step, I hope, will be a letter from our local officials in which we ask the Transportation Commission to do that audit.
And then Doug, I just, your interest in the ferries, what you like to focus on if you're in that seat.
Absolutely. Public's lost confidence in the ferry system for various reasons. Part of it's leadership, and I know we're at time here, so I want to focus on the what I've proposed. I propose that we immediately assign the state auditor to do a complete top-to-bottom audit. This is one of the organizations that there really has been a silence from them. I don't want to call it secrecy, but when someone starts to take the wagons and circle them, something's going on inside those wagons, and we need to get the state auditor to do that. We need to hold the managers accountable for what they're doing. David Mosley, I hear constantly when I'm knocking on doors and I run across ferry workers, they're saying management is not listening to the people on the ground. We are seeing inefficiencies, waste, and abuse. We need to streamline getting that information up the chain, get the middle management out of the way so that the Mosley and the leaders can make decisions that are going to make a better ferry system. We need to continue with the Passenger Vessel Association review that the governor has suggested, and let's see what comes out of that. Let's implement those saving strategies and reorganization that they recommend. And that we need to develop stronger labor management relations. By developing those relations, we'll get some of the cost-saving ideas that are going to reform the system. It's amazing what you can do to change an organization when you listen to the people who are implementing the work. We've done that in our fire department. We've gotten phenomenal response from the people actually providing the service. We've changed our organization to fit those needs, and we've become more efficient. We use the tax dollar a lot more wisely than we used to in the past, and I think we can do the same thing by developing stronger labor management relations in the ferry system.
Thank you both very much. I think that was really productive and a good hour spent. What I like to do just at the very end is give you both a minute, a very concise statement, anything that we maybe missed, anything you'd like to just repeat or just tell us how much you enjoyed the time. We'll go. This time we'll let Doug lead off.
Okay, sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to the last half of this election campaign. I'm excited. I am just a citizen of the community, and really that's the great thing about the state of Washington. It's a citizen legislature. I want to be the next legislature from the 26th district because I think that we can take some ideas of common sense, I call them, but maybe aren't so common sense anymore, that the tax dollar truly is the citizens, that we truly cannot spend more than we make, that people actually want to go back to work, and we need job creation, and we need that job creation through helping small business get back on their feet so they can provide the jobs that are so badly needed by our communities. Those are the things that are going to help us get out of this recession. Instead of focusing on what more we can do or focus on programs or cutting, we need just to look at spending. We truly have a spending issue, not a tax issue in this state. We can do this if we work together. We create a coalition down there that says that the citizen is angry, the taxpayer says enough is enough. We're going to go down there, work together, create a new system of government. But the first thing we need to do is focus on getting people back to work, and that's what I want to do.
Doug is going to be very happy with me as his legislator.
At least for the next 3 months.
The next couple of months here as we head to this November election for me, and I opened by talking about how concerned I am about the state of our politics. Are we capable of actually doing something, or are we going to stay, at swords points here in this very unhealthy climate? So what I'm trying to do is actually shift my campaign from marketing me to actually talking about what these issues are, where we need to go, and to work on the politics. My view is that the real outcome of the election in November is not just the numbers of votes. It will be the political climate that we've been able to create here in Kitsap and Pierce in the 26th. So that's what I'm working on, is that on the day after the election, there will be a kind of cooperative climate that Republicans, Democrats, and all those independents in between will feel like we are actually going to work together to solve some hard problems. To me, that's the real challenge of the next few weeks of this campaign. That's why I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Very good. Appreciate it.